We've got Mia from Meta on Zoom. Mia, if you can turn on your camera and your mic. Mia, we've got 20 minutes with you this afternoon, including any time for questions. I appreciate the fact that you're joining us early, and I'll hand over to you to start.
Kia ora koutou. Thank you so much for inviting Meta to appear before you today, and I thought it might be helpful. Obviously happy to answer any questions you have about our submission, but there have also been some developments since we made our submission earlier this year that I thought might be of interest to the committee that I thought I could start with sharing an update about. So at the outset, I wanted to emphasise that from Meta's perspective, we certainly share the commitment of the New Zealand government and New Zealand policymakers such as yourselves to ensure that young people have positive, age-appropriate and safe experiences online. We certainly recognise our responsibility to protect the safety of the people who use our services, especially young people, and it's essential to our business in many aspects because people will only continue to use our services if they feel welcome and safe. In terms of the more recent developments since we filed our submission, firstly, as we noted in our submission at the start of this year, we started rolling out teen accounts on Instagram, including in New Zealand. And since we made our submission, we've now completed that global rollout. And so globally now we've placed hundreds of millions of teens into teen accounts. Now, teen accounts offer young people enhanced protections, like automatically being placed into private accounts and some of the strictest settings of our content controls. Our safety and privacy settings have been developed over many years and through many consultations. So since 2018, we've consulted with more than 600 stakeholders, 300 young people and 270 parents from over 35 countries to help inform the types of protections and tools that would be most useful to them. With our introduction of teen accounts on Instagram and now its expansion to both Facebook and Messenger, this really reflects our belief that young people deserve online spaces that are age appropriate, that are protective, and that are guided by the adults in their lives. And we're very encouraged that 9 out of every 10 active teen accounts have remained in the stricter content settings. Another important development since we filed our submission at the end of July the global regulatory developments that are seeking to promote a whole of ecosystem approach to age assurance. So whilst a lot of the debate has focused solely on social media, we note that this committee is considering all online activity and experiences of young New Zealanders. And if we think about the way in which young people move seamlessly between different apps, that's why we believe that it's important that age assurance is an industry-wide commitment for the online ecosystem. One challenge with providing an age-appropriate experience online is that some degree of personal information is required. So that's either age-related data, it's ID verification, it's age estimation using biometric data, or it's behavioural data using age inference models. And if each app individually has to verify age, then there are increased privacy and security risks and an increased burden on young people and their families to confirm their age with each app. A similar approach, but one that is a data minimization approach, is App Store or operating system level age assurance. So under this model, app stores like the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store would confirm age and then share age band signals with each app. And then each app tailors their age appropriate experience to these signals and feeds back any relevant information. So we're heartened that a number of regulators in other countries are sharing this vision. So in the US, there are 20 states that have introduced App Store legislation, and we've seen 3 states, Louisiana, Texas and Utah, pass App Store accountability language, and in August Brazil passed the Brazil Youth Safety Bill. So our view is that rather than locking teens out of digital platforms entirely, which can push them towards less regulated spaces, there's an opportunity for New Zealand to create a more balanced, effective and enforceable solution similar to the approach that other jurisdictions have undertaken. But hopefully those opening remarks are helpful in providing an update on what's been happening on these issues since our submission, and I look forward to your questions.
Thanks, Mia. I'm just going to ask the first question. In terms of the App Store verification, doesn't that just move the liability from the social media platform to the App Store?
I understand the concern around that, and the answer is no. So the idea is a whole of ecosystem approach where each individual app is also undertaking the investment in age assurance, similar to what Meta does now. The critical thing with the App Store model is where is the data collected to verify that age at the outset. So is that each individual app trying to do that, or does it get once at the App Store level at sort of that moment when the phone or the computer is being set up, and then it's shared in a privacy protective way for all of the apps within the ecosystem to then be providing an age assurance system based on that original signal that's been collected in a data minimization way.
And then so a supplementary to that, we heard earlier today that after sort of 6 or 8 weeks, your algorithm essentially can really understand someone's birth date down to days or weeks. If you were then getting a different signal from the actual usage of that individual, let's say a 15-year-old, to what the App Store had told you, do you then feed back and say, hey, you've got it wrong?
Yeah, that's certainly the model that we'd be advocating for, that there's an ongoing communication between all players within the ecosystem. That's why we're calling it a whole of ecosystem approach, to make sure that there's constant engagement around this issue of age, because from our perspective, it's very important that people have age appropriate experiences online, but it is challenging for every individual app or device to be collecting age in a different way.
Great. Honourable Phil Twyford.
Hi, thanks for the
question and a sup, and then we'll go around.
Sure, thanks for the submission. Do the teen accounts have a different algorithm?
So, I mean, there's different algorithms that are running across the site many different times, but if you're referring to the distribution of like the content ranking algorithm, then the teen accounts have the strictest content controls to reduce exposure to more sensitive types of content that might otherwise be permitted under our content policies.
So obviously things like suicide and self-harm are things that we don't want our adolescent kids to be subjected to online, but often those things are the end product of being immersed in an unremitting diet of kind of status competition and body image competition that kids are exposed to on sites like yours. Do you have any controls underway in terms of the way your algorithms manage users' exposure to those things?
Yeah, well, if I maybe start by just sort of differentiating out between content ranking algorithms and recommendation algorithms. And so the content ranking algorithms are designed to, within the body of content that you could potentially be seen, ensure that the content that we predict is going to be most relevant, useful, and interesting to someone is higher to the top of their feed, so that they're getting to the relevant content faster than having to scroll all the way through. And then there's recommendation algorithms that are trying to connect people with content that they might be interested but they're not otherwise connected with. And we have both content policies that try to remove and proactively detect and prevent people from seeing harmful content before it's reported to us. We have content distribution guidelines about reducing the distribution of content that might be sensitive, and then we have recommendation guidelines that prevent the sharing or the recommendation of content that might also be sensitive. So we have a number of different ways in which we have policies and technology designed to reduce people's exposure to that type of harmful content.
Can I have one more, Chair?
Quick one.
Okay. So, but do you consider constant body exposure to body image competition and status competition that is a feature of your platform? Do you think that is harmful content? Does that fall within your definition of harmful content when we're talking about adolescents?
Yeah, so we certainly have policies that are designed to remove and restrict self-harm type of content, including harmful body image content. And we work really closely with experts in mental health and in body image disorders to try to make sure that our policies are updated as there are new and different trends that are occurring. So certainly from our perspective, we have policies, we implement those policies, and then we work with experts to try to make sure that they're up to date and current to reduce people's people being exposed to that type of content. And then we also, one of the things I think that can happen is obviously we're designing our platforms for a large number of people to be using them, but it's not always possible to know what might be going on in a particular person's life. So there are additional controls. For example, if you're, if there's a particular type of content that you don't want to see, you can go into the Why Am I Seeing This tool. It's available on every post or every ad. And then we say, these are the types of interests that we think you have. And if you don't want those, then you can change those or block particular things, so that, again, if there's something that we don't know about that you need for your protection, then people can make a setting that gives them the type of content and services that are most helpful to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. So my question is about parental control. Very keen to understand if somebody tries to create another account to bypass parental control, do you have any safeguards there? And the second is, what is the kind of proportion of accounts that have parental control compared to what it should be? So basically 2 questions in there. Yeah.
Sure, certainly. So I think certainly the way that we have designed the teen accounts experience is designed to increase the engagement and conversation between young people and their parents around their online activity. And so there's sort of 2 levels of settings. So obviously teen accounts is between 13 and 18 on our services. And then at the older age bracket, teens can only get into less restrictive settings with the with the permission of the parent. So we are trying to sort of create an ecosystem environment that sort of encourages that dialogue. And then there are certain transparency tools that parents can have in relation to teen accounts that, for example, let them see, the types of content that
Sorry, I'm going to interrupt because we are short of time. So
Sorry.
What I want to understand is, if somebody tries to create a secondary account, they know
Yes.
that one account, the primary account, is controlled by parents, and
Yes.
the teenager who is between 13 to 18 decides to create another account to bypass that control. Do you
Yes.
have safeguards there so that this teen cannot create a secondary account? That is the first question. And second is the proportion of accounts that have parental control. Just looking to see
Sure.
what kind of awareness is needed.
Yeah, so on the second one, I don't have that information to hand, and I'm happy to see what I can share with you as part of responding as a follow-up to the committee's work. And on the first one, a lot of the times a young person will have multiple accounts, but they'll be linked through the same email address, and so then the same kind of parental controls will kick in. And then I think in relation, if they had like a completely separate one, I'd have to sort of go and sort of workshop this with the product teams, but there are different triggers that an account can trip over on the site that may require that account to be age checked, and so then it gets put through similar provisions in relation to being placed into teen accounts, and then we go back through that same flow of needing to engage with parents.
So are we not making an assumption that it will be the same email ID that that person will use, because that person could use different email ID? Impossible.
Sure. Look, if a young person is definitely trying to evade particular systems, they will try to do that. But from our perspective, we have a range of different sort of, we call it a waterfall approach, to try to make sure that we're understanding, when an account might be changing its age or misrepresenting its age, so that we can give them the right kind of experience on the platform.
Okay, Vanessa.
Okay.
Thank you very much. One of the harms that have been highlighted potentially is just the addictive nature of some of the features, for example, infinite scrolling that can go on. It's basically biohacking the human dopamine axis, and is related to addictive behaviour that would meet the clinical threshold. How would limits on infinite scrolling, and also the ability to have a monitoring or a research ability to see algorithmic transparency, how would that actually work, or could that actually work?
Yeah, maybe if I sort of give you two
parts of
sort
those
of answers
controls
to answer your question. So the first part is, look, I think the suggestion that that our services are designed to be intentionally addictive really misrepresents our intentions and the work that we do. We want people to have a positive and intentional experience using our services, and certainly within teen accounts there's a number of time management controls, including the ability for the parents to set daily time limits. So we do try to provide tools. Obviously, algorithmic content ranking is designed to put the most relevant content up the top so that you see the most interesting content first, and then can go and do other things. And then there's additional time management tools that we invest. But then on the second part, in terms of algorithmic transparency, I mentioned as part of my answer to the other question that we do have, there's on-platform tools called Why Am I Seeing This and Why Am I Seeing This ad that allow you to see the background and context about why you're seeing that particular ad and go in and change your settings if it's not relevant to you or not interesting. And then we also have systems cards that we publish in our Transparency Centre that provide insights into the different signals that we take into account when running the various different recommendation and ranking algorithms across the different surfaces on our platform.
Thank you, but I was meaning the ability for a monitoring agency or a research institute to be able to see those settings rather than the individuals.
Sure. So the systems cards, anyone can go into the systems cards. They're publicly available. So if a researcher or monitoring agency want to look at those, they can go and see the different signals that we take into account. I'm not quite sure technically, how else you're thinking about it. And I'm happy to send as a follow-up a link to the systems cards that have been provided in case that's helpful to your work.
Thank you.
Francisco.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you so much for fronting in front of the committee, Mia. One of the things, it's really encouraging to see that Meta is taking all these positive steps, rolling out the teen accounts, doing all this good self-regulation. But I guess I'm just concerned that when the attention and spotlight ends up fading, that you guys will end up rolling a lot of it back. And I'll give you an example of that. Is there used to be a fact-checking program that Meta instituted, partly as a result of the pressure that you guys faced because of the Myanmar genocide. But earlier this year, you've unrolled the program. So how can, I guess, regulators have some sort of assurance that when the spotlight fades and when we stop paying attention to you guys, that you guys won't end up unrolling a lot of these features back?
Well, thank you for that question. And I might respond by sort of breaking it into two parts, and firstly just sharing an update about the fact-checking program. So the fact-checking program is still in place in New Zealand. The announcement that I think you're referring to was at the start of the year, where we announced that we were switching our fact-checking program from being reliant on third-party fact-checkers to the community notes method of fact-checking. And so that has been what's been rolled out in the US, and we're working through improvements and a greater sort of rollout of that program. So there's certainly been a switch in the US in relation to how fact-checking is undertaken, but certainly in New Zealand it's still the same model that we announced several years ago and have been actively invested in New Zealand. But having said that, I think, sort of more broadly in terms of the variety of different measures that have been in place on our services, we've had our content policies and enforced those, for well over a decade. We've been steadily increasing our investment in proactive detection technology. We've been publishing transparency reports now for well over 5 years and increasing the level of transparency that's available. And particularly in New Zealand, several years ago, we did, we were part of the industry coalition that started publishing transparency reports against the code of practice for online safety and harm. So we have been continually trying to invest in these, and have been also very grateful to work with a large number of different stakeholders in New Zealand, responding to their questions and making sure that we're understanding and responsive to local concerns in New Zealand.
Thanks. Grant McCullum.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I really appreciate it. It's been very informative. I suppose when we dial this right back, we're doing this inquiry because there's a genuine concern, particularly from parents, about what their children are being exposed to and the influence it's having on them in a what broader sense. So so parents are telling us this, yet you're telling us that you're fixing it and all these things are going on, yet these problems are still very much existing. I'd be keen to hear your response to that, And then secondly, I just want to understand that the teen accounts. So if you, are they a voluntary or opt-in thing, or are they intended to be compulsory for anyone who's under a certain age?
Yeah, I might take the second question first. So in relation to teen accounts, that is something that we've been gradually rolling out, and it's not designed to be voluntary. It's designed to be the experience for anyone who's between the ages of 13 and 18 on our services. So, and then again, to sort of build on the comment that I made to your colleague sitting next to you, the idea as well is that as the teen, sort of ages up, that there is increased incentive for conversation between the parent and the young person. And I think that sort of goes to trying to answer your first question, is that I think, online safety really, from our experience, is really a multi-stakeholder commitment. Industry players such as ourselves need to be stepping up and doing what we can to, invest in the right policies, the enforcement of those policies, and the right tools and settings to keep people safe. And then we also need, to work with governments around rule setting and understanding community concerns. And then we also need to work with local community partners and parental and safety groups. And I think trying to create that dialogue, that sort of last part of the dialogue around education and literacy and ongoing engagement, so that parents feel empowered about how to have these conversations and address some of these challenging issues. I think that's where there's just a constant need to keep engaging and doing more. And that's certainly how we've designed teen accounts, is to incentivize that engagement by offering the teen that's older the ability to get slightly fewer, less restrictive settings, but only if they've had that conversation with their parents.
Mia, I appreciate we started early. Happy to answer a couple more questions.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Parmjit Palmer.
Thank you so much. I'm really keen to understand the experience in Australia leading up to the ban. And I just want to understand, is it going to be workable, and what do you think will be the error margin?
It might be helpful if I start by just sort of giving you an overview of the different processes that have been happening in Australia, because not all of them have been held in public. So there's about 4 different processes that are underway in Australia at the moment in the lead up to the enforcement date on the 10th of December. So the first of those was a scope of services consultation. So that's which services are within the scope of the ban. And then the second is the age assurance technology trial report, which I think you had the project director on earlier today. Then there's work underway with the Privacy Commissioner on privacy guidance. And then there's also the reasonable steps guidance that's just been released. So we're still waiting for a final decision on the scope of services and on the privacy guidance. And so I think, there's still a lot of work to be done here. But I do think that the law in Australia was rushed through in, I think, less than a week. And that we didn't have a lot of conversations at the time around, what we do around age assurance. We just launched teen accounts in Australia in September 2024, and the law was rushed through shortly after that. So I think there's still a lot of more conversations that can be had around sort of the industry approach to age assurance, and obviously a lot of the very voluminous findings of the age assurance technology trial report.
Doesn't give much confidence then.
Phil Twyford.
Would Meta release the code of your algorithm so that it can be analysed and discussed publicly?
Well, that's sort of what we've tried to do with the release of the systems cards. There's been a number of suggestions around of a similar vein over the years, but I think the challenge is there's sort of no one code, and there's tweaks to the algorithm all the time, because, in some respects we're trying to thwart, malicious actors. In other respects, where there's new updates that are being released. So we have, and again, it sounds like it might be helpful to the committee if I send through a link to these systems cards. We have tried to provide transparency, sort of at the sort of system level around the large number of different signals that we take into account when deciding what type of content to provide. And then we've also tried to provide guidance in terms of the policy decisions that we make in both our content distribution guidelines and our recommendation guidelines, and then at the user level, so people understand, well, why am I seeing this particular piece of content, and what can I do to control that experience if it's not something that is relevant to someone.
So the system cards are you saying they're effectively the code?
No.
Well,
provided a
it's not-
detailed understanding of how the algorithm works at any point in time?
Well, it's not, I wouldn't say it's a code, but it is designed to provide insights into what the inputs are to the algorithm in making a decision about the types of content that people see.
Okay.
Okay.
Mia, I appreciate that Meta is doing a range of things in its view to address some of these issues. I don't know how many of the inquiry submissions you've listened to, but I've sat through all of them. And it's very clear that there is a significant challenge that parents, that organisations, that schools are concerned about the impacts of online harm here in New Zealand. And I'm sure you're experiencing this in other countries around the world, and there's been a number of legislative changes, as you've referenced. At what point does Meta go, we need to do significantly more than we are in order to solve the underlying problem?
So I think over the years, we have been increasing the work that we do. I mean, when you think back to the very early days of Meta, there was a much simpler content policy and it was primarily user reporting. If you look at our transparency reports now, with something like fake accounts, 99.8% of those are things that we find before anyone reports them to us. And in terms of, how our policies are enforced and the transparency that we've provided, we've continued to update them. And then with the rollout of teen accounts now being concluded globally on Instagram and starting on Facebook and Messenger, again, we're hopeful that people will start to see that there've been, it's been a gradual increase, but hopefully parents can start to feel the reassurance that their concerns are being addressed and also that there's increased conversations that are happening, intergenerational conversations around some of these issues. So for our part, I mean, obviously young people use a large number of different apps and, there's gaming platforms, messaging platforms, etc. So we continue to press to make sure that we're doing our part, but also for industry-wide solutions so that our parents can feel that the digital industry as a whole is committing to a standard for them.
So I hear that, and I hear what you're saying in terms of incremental improvement. But if I take Vanessa's point about the infinite scrolling, and I see it in friends, in our own house, in the community, we've heard it through these submissions on a daily basis. At what point does Meta go, this approach isn't working, and we need to go back maybe to the drawing board and say, how do we achieve these positive benefits of online social engagement, but actually much more seriously and directly help solve the problems that we've heard about through this inquiry?
Well, I think in relation to, sort of the algorithmic delivery of content, we have adopted a range of different approaches designed to address those people's concerns about not understanding why they're seeing particular pieces of content through policies and through enforcement of those, and then transparency around them, and then giving tools directly into people's hands. And that's another feature of the teen accounts, is around these time management tools. So if people feel that they need additional controls in terms of managing their daily use of our apps, then we've tried to set those up so that they're much easier to use.
I'll give a final question to Vanessa.
Thank you. In the Transparency Centre, number 3 on the on this card is make predictions. That would Meta make the AI systems and the models it uses, the inputs, the assumptions, and the essentially the predictive model available for scrutiny by a monitoring agency or academic scrutiny?
Sorry, are you quoting from the Transparency Centre, or are you just asking on a principle basis?
Yes. No, I'm reading off the number 3 on the Transparency Centre, looking at how Facebook Reels work,
Right.
and saying that AI system uses models that makes predictions. Well, models are based on mathematical assumptions and prediction models that are based on mathematical calculations that have input amounts of data. Would Meta make the raw mathematical and input data available for scrutiny via either a monitoring agency or academic research?
Well, with respect to academic research, there is the Meta Content and API library where researchers can get access to that in order to be able to continue to undertake research, but that won't necessarily be the models or the.
Yeah, that's why I'm asking if Meta would
And
allow
typically when
access
we-
to the models, because that's what
Of
that's what runs it. So would they
Yes.
allow access to the models?
Yes, sorry, and let me get to that question. Typically, when we've engaged with these types of questions over the years with different policymakers and regulators, we haven't been able to identify ways in which that would be technically feasible or meaningful in a way that would sort of move things forward. And that's why we've adopted the different approaches that we have to try to provide the algorithmic transparency and controls.
So no.
Thank you, Mia. Appreciate the time you've given us this afternoon, and appreciate the input you've had into the inquiry.
Thank you so much, and all the best with the rest of the hearing. Thank you.
Thank you.